So physical keyboards on phones are a thing of the past. But before we had the modern day slab of glass and metal that we call phones, smartphones and physical keyboards dominated the market for years and years. So now it looks like the fine people over at Clicks are trying to bring the physical keyboard back to smartphones in 2024. Hi, I'm Fernando, and if you guys are fans of all things Apple, tech-related, tutorial walkthroughs, or anything in between, definitely subscribe to the channel, but let's talk about Clicks, let's get into it. So when the Clicks keyboard released earlier this year for the iPhone 14 lineup of phones, I was immediately intrigued because I'm old enough or just old enough to remember having kind of a year and a half of experimentation with these physical keyboards on those 2005 and 2006 smartphones, from the BlackBerry Pearl, which kind of had a T9 and QWERTY keyboard put together. I remember the BlackBerry Bold. I even remember the T-Mobile Sidekick, the Dwayne Wade edition one. Leave a comment down below if you guys are old enough to remember that one. And those phones were the ones that made me fall in love with consumer tech, especially at the smartphone level. But then in 2007, once the iPhone came out, I didn't get it on day one, but about 3-4 months later, I picked up the first iPhone from AT&T, and that was the last time that I used a physical keyboard. So when Michael Fisher and his team decided to bring back the physical keyboard to 2024 for the modern day iPhone, the iPhone 14, and the 15 series of iPhones, I definitely had to take a stab at it to see exactly if it brought back, first off, any nostalgia and any feeling, but then also to see if it was a useful accessory in today's world. So I wanted to answer a few questions when it came to this Clicks keyboard to get into my review. The first one is this going to be a true everyday accessory that you're going to use and use it efficiently and productively, or is it more of kind of like a nostalgic gimmick that you're going to pull out every once in a while to show it off but not really use it? And then lastly, I wanted to see if the size of this accessory will be a detriment to the actual user, because if you are using it with a 15 Pro Max like I am, it is a pretty large package. It isn't super heavy, but it is relatively big, and it does take some time to get used to. So let's get into the review. So first and foremost, let's talk about the design, because I'm sure once they first started thinking about this product, the first thing they thought was that they cannot make this thing too heavy, because the iPhones, day in and day out, I guess during the 15 Pro and Pro Max versions, they got a little bit lighter, but for the most part, they got heavier and heavier, especially with the iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max series, because of that stainless steel especially. So I'm sure that they wanted to pick the right materials that kind of struck that balance of both feeling premium and well worth the money that it costs, but then also not making it too heavy where, again, it becomes a detriment to the user and they don't actually want to be using this thing at the end of the day. And I thought they actually struck a great balance, right? It's made out of this kind of like rubbery material, very similar to the material that you get from iPhone cases, the rubbery ones, the plasticky ones, but then also the same material that you kind of feel on the Magic Keyboard for the iPad, on the backside, and then the older Magic Keyboard as well. So it is a very familiar material, and it is very soft to the touch, very pleasant, and it is relatively thin overall for exactly what you're dealing with. And what I like about it is that it is malleable, meaning that it's very easy to kind of move off and take on and off, but also rigid enough so it stays on your phone even if you do drop your phone with this keyboard case on. And then in terms of weight, like I said, they did strike that good balance of still keeping it light. Honestly, when you grab the device itself without the iPhone in there, I was relatively surprised of how light it was, because again, you're dealing with a full QWERTY keyboard. Now again, there probably isn't a lot of heavy metals in there or anything like that. It's mostly plasticky and kind of this rubbery material, but it still feels extremely quality and well built, especially when you're clicking on these buttons, and it stays lightweight. So for the smaller version, for the 15 Pro, it's 62 grams, and then 65 grams for the 15 Pro Max, and if you add that onto the other iPhones, it's still a relatively lightweight package. Now before we get into the actual typing experience, which is probably what you guys want to know about, I do want to talk about the availability and the pricing and the variability that they have in terms of which iPhones they support. So they first launched with the iPhone 14 Pro and then the 14 Pro Max, so obviously those are going to be lightning enabled iPhone cases and Clicks cases for power pass-through and things like that, and we'll touch on that in a little bit, but then they also have it for the entire 15 lineup, which is available. So the smaller versions of these, so for the 14 Pro and the 15 and 15 Pro, they're $139, and then for the larger versions, so the 15 Plus, 14 Pro Max, and 15 Pro Max, it is $159. And then it comes in 4 different colorways. The one that I've been showing you is the London Sky one. They also have a Bumblebee color, which is this bright yellow. They have Royal Ink, and then they have the Miami Beach one, which I think is probably the coolest looking one if you're into that Miami Vice look. So now let's talk about the typing experience. And what I like about this is that they give you a nice quick start guide in order to teach you exactly how to use this thing. Because again, obviously you can take it out of the box, plug it in, and then just use it as a keyboard, but they wanted to be a little bit more intentional to show off exactly all the features and the value adds that it brings by showing off different shortcuts and different commands and how you use a space bar and how it works inside of different applications and things like that, which I thought was a very smart idea. So when you first open up the packaging, it tells you to scan a QR code and download the application, the Clicks application. Now you do not need the Clicks app in order to use this thing. They do recommend downloading it because there are some frequent firmware updates, which are pretty immediate when you do click on update, which is nice to see. And there's also some other controls, like being able to control the brightness for the backlit keys because they are backlit, which is a nice little touch. and then also a power management section, which we'll touch on in a little bit. But installing the iPhone into the Qlicks keyboard is very easy. You just kind of bend back the top of it, slide it right in, and then bend that rubbery plastic around the iPhone itself. And again, it fits very snug, and I haven't had any issues with the iPhone popping out, but it's also very easy to take off if you want to. So I think they kind of kept in mind that, yes, there are going to be some people using this on a daily basis at all times, but there will also be people that are going to be removing and then putting this back in multiple times a day, which is kind of how I've been using it, which is kind of removing it and putting it on as I see fit. And what's nice about this physical keyboard is that it mimics the virtual keyboard very well on the iPhone, so it's very familiar once you start using it. Like being able to double tap on the shift key to actually caps lock it and lock it in there, or double tapping on the numbers key to leave it on the number side for more than just one number click and things like that. So it's very familiar if you are used to the iPhone keyboard specifically. But during the Get Started guide, they give you a bunch of hotkeys to let you know, like, hey, the shift key is going to capitalize letters, the number key is to give you the numbers, the command key is to give you different command shortcuts when you combine it with other letters and things like that. Like command H is going to be to take you home no matter where you are, or command spacebar brings up the spotlight search and things like that. So there's a lot of use cases and thoughtfulness that went into making this keyboard. So I'm not going to go over all the shortcuts, but I'll leave a link down below for their Get Started guide, and maybe I'll put them up here because there's a bunch of different ones for like Safari and iMovie and messages and things like that that just make it a little bit easier to type to make up for the actual speed of physically typing compared to the virtual keyboard. So what has my personal experience with the Qlicks keyboard been, right? Like I mentioned, I'm using the 15 Pro Max, so the first thing that I will say is, even though it's not heavy, it is a large kind of footprint that you are holding onto. You can definitely use it the same way that you would type on your regular iPhone, so kind of pinky underneath to kind of hold it steady and then type away on the keyboard itself. It doesn't get top heavy, like at no point have I dropped it over or anything like that, but if you're somebody that has like small shorts or you wear skinny jeans, you can probably fit it in there, but just know that it's a decently sized form factor. I do wish that I had a 15 Pro to compare it to because I think that would be the perfect size, but I did get used to the actual size and the form factor and the actual footprint of the 15 Pro Max with the Qlicks keyboard, and for the most part, it's pretty easy to wield. And then when it comes to actually typing this thing, it is extremely satisfying. I forgot how nice those clicks were. Like, it reminds me of the old Blackberries, how tactile it was, how nice it was to click, that kind of like clicking sound that you personally hear. But it is kind of nice how they made it loud enough so you can physically hear the actual keys being clicked, and it's a very satisfying sound, but not so loud that it's going to be bothering the person next to you no matter what situation you're in. So they kind of struck that balance when it comes to the actual clicking feedback and the tactility of the keys themselves. And then the size of the keys are actually very comfortable as well. Like, I don't have the biggest thumbs or anything like that, but my dad, for instance, he's got some bigger fingers and he was still able to type away like it was his old BlackBerry Bold from back in the day, because he was somebody that refused to give up the physical keyboard until around the iPhone 7, and then he finally kind of dove in fully. But another cool thing is that I started to get used to the shortcuts on this keyboard that made it very easy to navigate. For instance, in Safari, if I'm just scrolling through a web page, if you just press spacebar, it'll kind of go to the next section of that actual page itself. I do wish they were able to do this with things like YouTube Shorts, so I can just like click the spacebar and it moves on to the next YouTube short, or clicks the spacebar and it goes to the next Instagram reel or something like that. Some cool things to take into account. Also, I use the Command Home button a lot, so Command H. I've also been able to master how to actually do the emojis because it's super easy. You just press the little number pad button on the bottom right, it pops up the emoji, and then you're good to go. And once you press on that emoji, it'll automatically go back down. So overall, the physical tactile experience of using applications, using the keyboard, has been very familiar and honestly a net positive overall. And it did bring back that nostalgic feeling of using a physical keyboard on such an amazing display. And that is another big value add when it comes to the iPhone and using this Qlicks keyboard, is that the idea and one of their selling points and what they've stated on their website is that it does open up the entire screen to do whatever you need to, even when you do need to type something out. For instance, I'm not a big Instagram person, I don't post Instagram stories or anything like that, but I'll know that a lot of people do, and when they are kind of editing an Instagram story or editing a reel or even editing a YouTube short, the keyboard will take up almost half of the entire display no matter what iPhone you're using, so it's a little bit hard and difficult to see exactly what you're typing, where you're typing it, if you need to manipulate the text underneath the keyboard. So now you have the entire canvas of that 6.5-inch display to be able to do whatever you need to and type away as you see fit. And same thing applies for simple things like being in the Notes application. You no longer have half of the Notes app completely taken up, or in Safari, if you pull up the search bar or the actual URL bar, you're not taking up the entire screen. And it works with every application that's using an actual virtual keyboard and just opens up that entire app, which I love to see. So now I do want to let everybody know why I'm not actually using it on a persistent basis all the time, and it doesn't really have to do with the size or the weight or anything like that. It actually comes down to the port and how that all functions. So I use my iPhone 15 Pro Max as my main camera for these YouTube videos, and I really use the USB-C port all the time. So for specifically the iPhone 15 lineup of Qlicks accessories, since it is a USB-C port, I did ask a question to the people at Qlicks asking what happens with data pass-through, right? Does the Clicks keyboard support data? And apparently how the controller works and how the USB-C port works on these iPhones, they had to pick and choose. They had to pick either power pass-through to be able to charge it with the Clicks keyboard still on, or the data pass-through. Again, I don't know the technicalities of it, but long story short, there's zero data pass-through that you can do on the actual iPhone when the Clicks keyboard is on. Which for me, as somebody who uses that USB-C port a lot for data pass-through, especially on a day-to-day basis, it does make it a little bit inconvenient, and that's why I ended up removing the Clicks keyboard from time to time to connect directly to my microphone or connect to my SSD and offset footage and things like that. But one positive of the USB-C version of the Clicks keyboard versus the Lightning version is that it does support 18-watt fast charging through the Clicks keyboard. So that's always good to know that you can easily charge up without removing the iPhone. Another thing to note is that the Clicks keyboard does work off the battery on the iPhone. There is no battery on the actual Clicks keyboard, which is probably why it remains so lightweight. But they do have some power management tools where if the Clicks keyboard does go idle for a bit, it'll disconnect the USB-C port physically, and then you won't be actually drawing any power, because if you are plugged into any USB-C accessory on the iPhone itself, it'll take up even the smallest amount of power. It'll start to trickle away because it is connected that way, and there isn't any kind of stoppage to that. But they were able to add it into the software to disconnect itself in order to save you some more battery when you are completely plugged in. And then with the iPhone 14 model, so the 14 Pro and Pro Max, since it is Lightning, they were still able actually to not only get power done, even though it isn't fast charging power, but you can also do some data. It's not the fastest data, I'm assuming. I haven't actually tested this out. I'm assuming it's regular USB 2 speeds, but you still get data, which means you can still use wired in CarPlay. So unfortunately, if you do use a wired USB-C connection with the 15 Pro and Pro Max on the Clicks keyboard, you're gonna have to remove your iPhone in order to have CarPlay and CarPlay working. So that to me was probably my biggest quote-unquote gripe. But again, since it is so easy to remove and to pop off and on, and I've done that probably over 100 times since I've been using this thing. Again, there is no kind of give on the case itself. It's not like warping or bending because I'm moving it too much. The USB-C connector is still strong and straight. There's no bending of the USB-C connector. So overall, I think it was designed to be able to pop off and on as many times as you see fit for people like myself who use that USB-C port on a frequent basis for more than just power. And then the final thing to note when it comes to charging or wireless charging in Magsafe, this is not Magsafe compatible because there is no Magsafe ring in there. So if you are somebody that has a 3-in-1 stand or something like that and you like to use standby mode, again, you're gonna have to remove the iPhone from the Clicks keyboard in order to charge it via Magsafe. Now, if you have a flat laying Magsafe puck, it will actually connect and find the magnets, and it'll still be able to charge when it is laying flat down, but don't expect it to stay propped up on a standing kind of Magsafe charger. But like I said, it does support regular wireless charging as well as Magsafe charging if it is laying flat, so the magnets can kind of find themselves, but the magnets won't be strong enough to maybe hold it up on a stand. So to answer the question if this is kind of a actual nice accessory or a gimmick, I'm definitely leaning towards this being an actual productive accessory because I do see myself typing away at this thing because it is so satisfying to type, and it's still plenty quick once you get used to it to actually type out and type as many emails and texts and messages that you want and still get a bunch done. So I love the fact that we now have a tactile form of typing away. And something else to note, for some reason you need to use a virtual keyboard when Clicks is still on, you just press that little keyboard button, it'll bring up the entire keyboard and you're good to go, because that's actually how I pull up my GIFs or GIFs depending on who you are and how you say it, because I like to be able to send those through my messages. But I like that I now have a full canvas on the iPhone to be able to see maybe an entire set of messages or an entire note or an entire PDF or anything like that that would normally be taken up halfway by the virtual keyboard. And while the size on the 15 Pro Max is relatively big, you are getting enough value out of it, in my opinion, to actually justify that extra footprint and size. I would just wear maybe pants that have some bigger pockets, or maybe put it in a side pocket on your bag or something like that to really make sure that it fits in that pocket. And again, I think the 15 Pro and then the smaller 15 one will definitely be a little bit more comfortable, especially if you have smaller hands. But as somebody who just has pretty normal hands, being able to just type away with both hands and feel that satisfying clicking is something that really brought me all the way back to 2005 and 2006, and I'm happy that we have it today. But that will just about do for this video, everybody. If you do want to pick one of these up, I'll leave their website down below. They were nice enough to send this review unit over for me to test out and see if I liked it or not, but all these thoughts were my own and they're not seeing this before you guys are seeing it, so these are the honest opinions that I have on this and both the pros and the cons of owning something like this. And like I said, they are available for $139 and $159 respectively, and I think they're available at Best Buy now, so I'll leave that link down below for you guys to check out. And I do think that this is a great gift for somebody who's missing the physical keyboard or somebody that likes to have the physical keyboard as an option. Like I said, for me, the perfect situation is for my dad, who still to this day misses his BlackBerry and he doesn't really like that virtual keyboard, even though now he just feels like he needs to use it because there are no really other good options at this point. But that's going to do it for this video. If you made it to the end, everybody, leave a little dolphin in the comments down below so I know you made it to the end. Leave a comment down below if you would use an accessory like this. Is this something that you're kind of yearning for? Have you tried a physical keyboard on the iPhone before? Because I personally haven't. Let me know in the comment down below. But if you guys like this video, YouTube thinks you're gonna like this video right here. And if not, there's another one right here for you guys to check out. But that's gonna do it for this video. Like I said, I'm Fernando. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And until next time, peace everybody. I definitely think it's worth a shot, especially getting it from Best Buy.